Yuba-Sutter.live's local government live streams are presented by Plumas Lake Self-Storage in Plumas Lake, where lifelong local residents are helping other residents keep things safe, providing indoor storage units, outdoor RV and vehicle parking, moving supplies, and Penske truck rentals. Details at plumaslakeselfstorage.com.
Good morning and welcome to the Yuba Water Agency Board of Directors meeting on Tuesday, August 15th, 2023. We're going to start with roll call, please.
Director Vasquez. Director Blazier.
Here.
Director Fuhrer.
Yes.
Director Bradford.
Here.
Director Messick.
Here.
Director Matthews.
Here.
Director Bishop.
Great, thank you. Next, Director Blazier, will you lead us in the pledge, please?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We'll need to figure out where the other flag went. So thank you to everyone for looking where the flag usually is. Those of you who did. It was a test. Okay. So next is public comment.
Public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to address the Board of Directors on any subject matter that is not on the meeting agenda and is within the board's subject matter jurisdiction. Public comment periods are limited to 3 minutes per person, and the total amount of time for public comment is 15 minutes. Persons participating by way of video conference or teleconference shall ensure their audio is muted at all times except when the board chair announces public comment periods. At those designated times, members of the public wishing to speak shall enable their audio and state their name for the record. When multiple members of the public wish to speak, the clerk will determine the order of speakers and announce their names accordingly. To ensure proper conduct, the board reserves the right to mute the audio and video of any member of the public, violating generally accepted principles and decorum of official public meetings.
Do we have any public comment this morning? Okay, I don't see any online and none in the audience. So with that, we will move on to consent items. Is there any board member that has a comment or question about the consent calendar?
Yeah, I think the says the South on the agenda says the South Division. I believe it should be the North. On the resolution, it says North
Division.
Okay.
I'll make
That
a
modification, I'll move to approve.
Okay, I have a motion for the consent. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a second. And is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to discussion items, starting with item 5. Consider approval of the revised Yuba Water Agency risk management policy, which was completed due to changes of the Energy Market Services Agreement with Shell Energy North America. Morning, Andy.
Good morning, Andy Richmond, Power Settlements Analyst for Yuba Water. Just going to talk briefly today about the changes to our energy risk management policy with the signing of our new Shell agreement back in April. There we go. So what we're going to briefly discuss today is we had the new Shell contract approved by the board March 21st, and that was executed April 1st. With that, we created the new changes to the ERM policy and creation of new staff responsibility. The last time we brought this policy to the board was November of 2021. So what is energy risk management? This policy outlines adopted rules and parameters around selling our hydropower generation, other energy products. This was originally developed back in 2016 with the end of the PG&E contract and we've made minor changes as operations in the markets have changed. The point of the Energy Risk Management Committee is determining mitigation measures to ensure compliance within our policy and make sure we're using our generators to the best ability, and we monitor and act against risk through a variety of mitigations. There are a whole variety of risks that we deal with. Here's a list of a few of them, starting with energy market risk. The market's constantly changing. There are rule changes both at the CAISO and the state level. So part of what we do is monitor and adapt to those changes. There are changes within pricing, as we've seen this year alone, where you have something like January of 2023, where prices go through the roof, and then you have a mild spring like we do and did this year. So part of what we do is monitor that and make changes as needed. There's a hydrology risk. We're all based on water. We have dry years, we have wet years. Then we have operational risk of making sure the project is operating to the best ability through maintenance. Regulatory and legislative risk. We're always keeping an eye on what the CAISO, Public Utilities Commission, Energy Commission, and the state legislator, and even the federal legislator is working on. And then we've developed the counterparty credit risk. This has mostly been just through Shell Energy with the way the old contract was written, but with the changes to our new contract and having the ability to sell our own product, we're having to develop this credit risk, which is the majority of the changes brought to you today.
Through the chair. Could you expand a little bit on what you want to, just going away.
There we go.
One bit, yeah, regulatory and legislative risks. What can you tell us about that issue?
Yeah, so at the CAISO, the CPUC, and CEC are kind of our main oversight within California. So there are always rule changes happening. A great example is the resource adequacy rule changes that we had after the rolling brownouts in August of 2020. So we're just keeping an eye on what they're doing. And if needed, we're able to comment as a stakeholder and watch those changes. We also have consultants who are very active in the rule changing process to making sure that those changes best adapt to Yuba Water Agency and our missions.
Particularly legislative risk.
Yeah, pass it to Willie.
So I can give you some example. Adam monitors all the legislation that comes through both for water and energy. I can give you an example. SB 100, which it's basically the renewable energy or carbon-free energy requirement of 2045. And there's all stages that get you to the requirement of carbon-free energy in 2045. That was a Senate bill, state legislation that we monitored. And in particular on that bill, and this is just an example, in particular on that bill, we wanted to make sure that large hydro that's 30 megawatts or greater would be considered carbon-free. Once we established that, we were okay with the overall legislation, but that's just one example of the legislation that we monitor to make sure that as it's being developed, there's not going to be impacts long-term to our ability to sell our product.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I have a question on CalPERS is reaping the benefits of being, as they term it, woke, or not having a responsibility to the highest return on what we sell. That it brought in outside interests that created the problem that CalPERS has now by not having the profit be the prime reason for selling. And do we have that situation where we sell based on people's political views or things that they vetoed a bill that required all public investment to be not motivated by the profit margin, profit aspect.
Director Vasquez, I'll take that question. So I think your question is do we make decisions on selling energy based on policies other than maximizing revenue? And we sell our energy based on the policy you're seeing today, and this policy has existed since 2016. So you direct us on how to market our energy. And currently we market our energy to get the maximum value of our generation resources from all the different products, energy, ancillary services, carbon-free, renewable energy credits, and others. This is the policy. This is what guides us on how to market our energy. And we do all that within compliance of all of our regulatory obligations. Obviously, FERC licensing, water rights, and other permits that we have to obtain to and adhere to operate. We control how we strategize, or you control and you tell us how to strategize our marketing. What we don't control is the outside world. And I would go back to SB 100 and use that as an example. We don't control the requirement of X % of the power in California needs to be from renewable sources or from carbon-free sources. What we do is adapt to those changes, but we don't drive those changes to our disadvantage.
All right, that was a big question to me.
And I think the only thing I'm Craig Nabla, project manager here, and I work in the front of office helping out with the selling of the products. And we go through a bid process when we do that. Like,
Okay, that's
just
fine.
like Willie had talked about, we look at the regulatory issues that we have to go through. We make sure we're meeting those. And then when we go out to the market, we look at broadly, both in the state and out of state, and we do look for that top price.
Okay,
For the constituents here in the county.
all right, thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, great. So what did we change in the policy? We're creating this credit risk mitigation. Like I said before, in the previous version of the contract, all of our credit was through Shell Energy. Now we have to take on a bit of that risk on our own. So we developed policy and procedures to make sure that we're looking at only selling to those who are credit worthy. Part of what we're doing is we're working with an outside entity to create credit reports for any counterparty we look at selling with. We're looking at credit scores. We're looking at letters of credit from banks with large amounts of assets, mostly the major banks in the US. We're creating the procedures to go through specific processes on approving and executing sales. And we've also created the energy transaction team, which is a combination of front office and middle back office to go through and analyze all these sales to make sure we're also getting the best dollar, but we're not selling to someone who's likely to not be able to pay. And we've done some minor restructuring of our committees and membership just to adapt since it's been a few years since we brought this to the board. And then a few changes in staff responsibilities, most of which I've already mentioned. The development of the transaction team. Front office is mainly handling sales, resource management, and scheduling. Middle and back office is doing the contract management, billing, data input, all the things you see behind the scenes. We developed the counterparty evaluation and onboarding process. That's that process we go through to make sure a group is credit worthy through a variety of documents and analysis. And we've developed some transaction limits to make sure that we have enough eyes on each deal before we sign it. And every single deal is approved by a minimum of 2 employees. And if it's above a certain dollar threshold, we actually have to have the general manager approve the sale.
Andy, have we had any problems getting paid with any of the deals we've made, or has it?
We have not.
Okay.
Most of our deals have been through Shell. So it's written in the contract that if a counterparty doesn't pay, we still get paid from Shell. So we've not had an issue with that.
Okay.
And we're making sure we do our due diligence to avoid that.
Great, thank you.
So with that, any final questions?
Any additional questions from the board? Do you have anything, Willie?
Yeah, excellent presentation, Andy and Creighton. Thanks for that. I think just to clarify, in 2016, when the agency was preparing to leave PG&E following the expiration of the power purchase agreement, we created the energy risk management policy and procedure. And it was much broader than what you see today. And it's because we didn't know the world we were entering into. So we wanted to cover everything that we possibly could, even if we didn't understand it at the time. And now that we've been operating for 7 years and we kind of understand who our counterparties are, we understand the products, we understand how basically the dynamics of the energy market, we were able to fine tune our energy risk management policy. So that's one of the things we did with these revisions. The other one is, you'll remember what you approved in March of this year is we kind of kept 50 megawatts of certain products available for Yuba Water Agency to sell directly to counterparties instead of selling it through Shell Energy. And that was for us to learn the market and understand who the counterparties are and to basically practice this independent sales of our products. So that imparts some risk and risk evaluation on the agency because we are now directly contracting with these folks. And so that's a major revision to the ERM policy as well. So that's the update. I just wanted to give you kind of the overarching purpose of these revisions.
Great, thank you. Any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none.
Move to approve.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, I have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great, motion passes. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you very much for the presentation.
Next, we're going to move on to receive update on the Watershed Resilience Program. Joanna, good morning.
Everyone, I'm Joanna Lessard. I'm the Watershed Manager. I work in the Resource Planning Division, and I'm excited to give you some updates on our Watershed Resilience.
Close to the microphone, us deaf people.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Is that too good?
Hearing goes second. After the tour of this watershed.
All right.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I'm actually happy to organize tours. So we've got some tours coming up in the next few weeks. So let me know and I can get any and all of you separately up in our water. So this is an overview of what I plan to cover today. I'm going to go through the background of our Watershed Resilience Program for anyone that's not familiar, and then give you some exciting updates on efforts in our upper watershed as well as upper Yuba County, specifically the North Yuba Forest Partnership, our Forest Resilience Bond, and additional projects. I always like to start with a slide. This is an overview of the Yuba Water's core mission areas. The Watershed Resilience Program was specifically developed because of an understanding of the risk to the agency really across all of these mission areas if a mega fire were to happen in our source watershed or the upper county. This slide really just kind of addresses the logistics of the situation. You can see Yuba County there in red. On the left here, you have Bullards Bar Reservoir right here. Most of our mission starts with New Bullards Bar and then downstream. However, our source watershed is the North Yuba River. Most of the North Yuba River, which is in Sierra County and in federal ownership. So for us to address the risk of forest health, we really needed to look outside of Yuba County and look for collaborators. The Watershed Resilience Program was developed in 2018 specifically to address the risk of catastrophic wildfire, to protect our local communities, safeguard our water supply, and to look for ways to develop large collaborative projects to increase pace and scale of this work. Okay, the formatting of these slides is a little weird. So this photo could be repeated anywhere in our watershed. On the left is a photo from the Yosemite Valley in 1899. On the right is the same photo in 1994. This really addresses the situation. The photo on the left is what we would consider a resilient forest. You can see there's large openings, there's mixed age stands, there's clumps of large trees. If a fire were to occur in this area, it would burn grass, it would burn the underbrush and fuels, but most of the trees would survive. On the right is the same area. This is what's resulted from 100 years of fire suppression. We have much more even age stands, very few openings. The branches touch each other. A fire in this area quickly gets into the crown and then spreads and creates the large catastrophic fires that we've seen increasing in severity and size over the last really 5 to 6 years. So why is a water agency involved in forest health efforts? This slide is a little bit dated now, but it shows the largest nearest fire to our source watershed. The area in green is the North Yuba River watershed. You can see Bullards Bar there at the bottom of the watershed. The North Complex fire burned in 2020. It burned in the Feather River watershed. It burned an area larger than the entire size of our source river watershed, and it burned within 4 miles of our watershed. It's important to note that the Feather River watershed is in very similar condition to the North Yuba River watershed. And at this point, it's just luck that we haven't had a catastrophic fire yet. In fact, the North Yuba River watershed is one of the last intact watersheds in California that has not experienced a mega fire yet. So there's a lot of focus in trying to get this watershed into resilience before that happens. So one of the first efforts that really kicked off our watershed resilience program was looking at ways to address the risk of fire in our source watershed. This really started with discussion of a funding mechanism to fund a project in the North Yuba River watershed. This map here is our watershed area again. All of the areas shown in color are projects that were developed by the federal government. They have all of the federal environmental permitting in place. They were considered shovel ready, but there was not a funding plan to implement these projects. We got involved with a funding scheme to fund just one of these projects, the Yuba project. It's in the far northeast corner in green. And it started with Blue Forest Conservation coming to Yuba Water to talk about collaborating on what they call a forest resilience bond. The forest resilience bond was a tool to bring private money to implementation of these kinds of projects, and then state and federal grants would pay those investors back. Yuba Water came in as a 30% partner to help secure the interest on the forest resilience bond loans and help sort of increase pace and scale of implementation. The Yuba project, through normal federal funding processes, would have taken about 10 years to complete. Through the forest resilience bond, it will take only 4 years, and we're about a year and a half away from that. So it really was an excellent tool to increase pace and scale. The relationships developed in creating that first forest resilience bond is what led to the North Yuba Forest Partnership being formed. The 9 entities shown on the right signed a memorandum of understanding in 2018 to work together to fund and implement all of the projects shown in color, to plan for new prioritized projects in all of the areas shown in white, and then to work at monitoring for the effectiveness of these treatments, as well as communication on sort of our process. There's been a lot of positive things happening in the North Yuba Forest Partnership, and you can draw a straight line to those positive outcomes from that very first forest resilience bond. We actually have another forest resilience bond that was funded in this area. It covers the Trapper area shown in yellow and the Camp and Padola areas shown in red, which are more adjacent to Bullard's Bar. That forest resilience bond includes about 3 times the treatment areas of the first one. We're also a 30% partner in that project. I'm going to go through the numbers in a second. And then the organization of the North Yuba Forest Partnership led to a planning document that was just signed last month. And it includes basically NEPA planning, National Environmental Policy Act planning for the entire watershed. It includes invasive species management across the entire watershed. It includes hydraulic mine remediation across the entire watershed, as well as an additional project. There'll be additional records of decision that come out of that environmental document. I believe it is one of the largest NEPA documents that the Forest Service has ever done. And that's a result of the organization of the North Yuba Forest Partnership. So we're really excited about that. Additionally, the organization of the North Yuba Forest Partnership, our ability to spend money and to work together to increase pace and scale, also led to significant federal investment in our watershed. Just last year, we were, or I guess it was this year, we were allocated $130 million in federal dollars from the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Had we not been so organized and not been so collaborative, it's very uncertain that we would have been allocated that money. So you can really draw a straight line to that funding. We didn't know that was coming. We didn't know COVID was coming. We didn't know those bills were coming, that they would have billions of dollars of watershed management money in them. But because they did, and we were ready to accept it, now we've got significant amount of implementation money. So this slide really just goes through those numbers. Again, the first forest resilience bond included 15,000 acres. Yuba is a 30% partner. Over 4 years, we've contributed 1.5 million to that bond. In the second one, it's 26,000 acres, and over 10 years, we will contribute $6 million to that to leverage $18 million in external funding. And that just started last year. I'm not sure why. What else slide is there? Yeah, the little, what's that? Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. And as I said, we were just allocated $130 million. And again, just to the North Yuba River area. And that really comes from that very first part of coordination that we did. So we're super excited about that.
Do we know approximately how many acres or square miles that 130 million might be able to treat?
That's a good question. I think the total, you know, the number changes a lot because fuel and labor changes a lot, but I think the current estimate for full implementation would be about 200 million. Again, you know, we don't even have all of the projects defined yet. So, you know, this is, I would say it's about, you know, 50 to 60% of the needed funding. And the spend plan for that 130 million is 15 years.
Okay, that's great. That's a huge amount of the watershed. So that's good to know. Thank you.
So now moving down to Yuba County, one of the first grants that I helped write for the Watershed Resilience Program is the Yuba Foothills Healthy Forests Grant. It's a CAL FIRE grant. It was a $4.5 million grant to treat about 5,400 acres in Yuba County. This grant was very collaborative as well. It includes Plumas National Forest, several private timber companies, Boy Scouts, and the Yuba Water Agency. We are the fiscal agent for the grant. This grant was super strategic in that it brought together large landowners in Yuba County to try to get a significant amount of acres into a single project. I think at the time it was also the largest grant that CAL FIRE had ever funded from this program. So 5,400 acres sounds small, but it's actually huge in the CAL FIRE grant world. So this slide shows the planned treatment acres. They're the areas shown in gray. And they were strategically planned to be near previously treated acres, which is the area shown in the yellow crosshatch. This project was evaluated to benefit a project influence zone of 71,000 acres, which includes over 2,700 structures. So it was a really strategic grant to try to do immediately needed fuels reduction treatments to try to get this whole area closer to resilience. So we started in 2020. Currently, we've treated just over 3,700 acres. Yuba Water and partners have accumulated around 600,000 in cost share so far, primarily with California Environmental Quality Act permitting requirements, as well as project management by registered professional foresters who manage the implementation for each of our partners. And we plan to complete in 2024. The primary treatments, there's some photos here shown on the right. They're all lattice fuel reduction primarily and removal of small trees. So it's a lot of mastication, biomass chipping, and a little bit of follow-up spray. And then I'm happy to report that we've just received our second Healthy Forest Grant. We're calling it the New Bullers Bar Healthy Forest Grant. This grant was just funded. We just signed the agreement last week or a few days ago, maybe even. It provides $7 million in new funding to treat about 4,000 acres. The difference in cost in acres is because fuel and labor keep going up. So every year the price per acre goes up. We've learned a lot from the last grant to this grant. It's again highly collaborative. It includes almost all the same partners in terms of large timber company partners. It includes the Bear Yuba Land Trust. Yuba Water Agency's footprint is much larger in this grant. We have about 600 acres in it. And then instead of the Plumas National Forest, we have the Tahoe National Forest and the National Forest Foundation as our key federal partner. This grant checks a whole bunch of really interesting boxes. So not only is it great fuels reduction treatment in Yuba County, the treatments that are in the Tahoe National Forest that NFF is implementing actually counts as cost share for that large federal grant. The 130 million came with strings. Each of the partners that are getting the implementation contracts with the USDA for that have to come up with 1 to 3% of cost share. This grant counts as NFF's cost share, so it supports that. Also, the treatment acres in the Tahoe are in that FRB 2 area. So it also is leveraging the forest resilience bond impact dollars to get the money on the ground right away. So it's really just checking lots of boxes at once. And then included in this grant, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more, is a really innovative California Environmental Quality Act CEQA document that will cover 175,000 acres of Yuba County. Usually when you do these kind of environmental permitting documents, you would often just include the acres in your grant. In this grant, we're including all acres in the county as well as the acres in our grant so that we're close to shovel ready across Yuba County, kind of similar to that NEPA document that covered the entire watershed. We're doing a CEQA document under this grant that will cover really all of the high-risk fire areas in Yuba County. So this is a map of the treatment plan for this project. You can see Bullard's Bar there, and then the black hash are the new treatment acres in this grant. The yellow are the acres that were in the previous grant that I talked about. And then you can see up there, sort of northeast of Bullard's, the Tahoe acres overlap with area in the camp and Trapper project areas, which are in the FRB2 area, Forest Resilience Bond 2 area. So as I said, this grant also includes really innovative environmental permitting plan. This is the area we plan to cover using the California Vegetation Treatment Program CEQA document. It's a environmental permitting document that was developed by CAL FIRE to allow for CEQA to be done a little bit more quickly and more efficiently. We used it in the first grant and it really was quite quick. We were able to complete our environmental permitting within, I think, 4 months. This will include an analysis of this entire area. So it will be all treatment acres and treatment types will be analyzed so that if a new project partner wants to do a forest health project under this footprint, like the Fire Safe Council, they would just have to do a little bit of those botanical surveys, check the archaeological records, and then file a notice of determination. They could use this CEQA document to proceed. So we're hoping it will again help increase pace and scale. And then we're supporting a lot of other projects. So those are really all of the projects that I would consider Yuba Water Agency as the lead. Now I'm going to cover several projects that we're funding through our grant program. So Kemptonville Community Partners, as you know, have been developing a biomass utilization project for quite a while. The implementation dollars that I've just talked about were a key need in terms of getting forest health work done, but you need a place to take that material. And so the next big bottleneck now, do we have all this implementation money, is infrastructure money, money for biomass utilization, money to get equipment to take the chips to places to utilize them. There's no biomass plant in our region. The nearest biomass plant, I think, is a 3-hour one-way drive. With fuel prices and labor prices, this is not, highly valuable material. Biomass chips are very, low market material. It's millions of dollars to transport those chips to have them taken to biomass plants that exist. So we really do need one in the region. Hamptonville now has plans for a 5-megawatt biomass plant. This would be in the vicinity of our forest health grants as well as the North Yuba Forest Partnership treatments. And they're very nearly ready to come to us to talk about a financing plan. And they have new partners with other co-located businesses now included in the project. They also now own the site. So they're really very, very close to implementation. We're excited about that. And then also we support the Yuba Watershed Protection and Fire Safe Council. We support their executive director, Allison Thompson, who's been very good at really increasing the visibility of the council. They do a lot of public outreach, education, and projects within the wild urban interface. They were able to use the Cal VTP document that I just talked about to cover a very large roadside fuel vegetation project. We helped fund that planning document, and they were able to then leverage that money to get a fire prevention grant to start implementing that project. So they've been very, very good at getting external funding as well. And then another bottleneck is workforce. Yeah.
Could you expand a little bit on the cost savings of we're hauling the disposal down to Roseville now? If we were to have it with the new bio plant, what would that dollar savings be per year?
So I can give you an example. So with just the Yuba Foothills Healthy Forest Grant, the biomass chipping acres that we had in that grant will cost approximately $2 million to truck those chips to the existing plants. If they were in the vicinity of our project area, that would be down to the thousands. I think, you know, you'd be saving all that round trip. You'd still have some labor costs. You'd still sell the chips, but chip prices are also very volatile. Every time there's a fire, chip prices tank because there's just a glut of this material. So several millions of dollars per project is a good estimate. Want to add to that, Willie? So as I was saying, the next bottleneck in addition to infrastructure are people. Just because we're snowballing in our funding doesn't mean we're snowballing in our workforce. So we funded the Yuba Community College's Watershed Resilience Program through our grant program. It's a $700,000 grant for them to develop certificate programs to help people engage in what we're calling a restoration economy. So the first 3 certificates they developed, one is a geographic information system certificate, which is a highly valuable skill in forest management, although it would be a very useful skill for lots of other types of jobs. There's also a soil conservation technician certificate, and then a field technician certificate, which is more on the implementation side. These certificates are designed to get kids right coming out of high school. They could go through these certificate programs and then get an entry-level job and work their way up. These would also be great certificates for people wanting to transition from other lines of work. There are other community colleges and universities addressing this need. We're hoping that this will help get a lot of Yuba County people involved in the restoration program. The opportunity is so great at this moment. I mean, $130 million over the next 20 years, plus, you know, because that's really just the start of it, is going to be spent in our upper watershed, and we would like people to come and work, and high school kids that are coming out of school now to join us. And then one other project I wanted to cover is the Sierra Fund has been working with us on a meadow restoration and mine remediation impact bond project. This was funded through a grant that we partnered with them on through the Bay Area Council. And it really is looking at the benefits of hydraulic mine remediation and monetizing those benefits to try to develop an impact bond type model for funding those kinds of projects specifically. They're going to come to you and give you an update on that project, so I won't say much more about it, but you'll be ready for it when they come. And this map just gives you an idea of the logistics of all these projects I talked about. So the area in yellow is the North Yuba Forest Partnership. Up there in green are the treatment acres for the first Forest Resilience Bond. Blue are the treatment acres for the second Forest Resilience Bond. And then the red is the Yuba Foothills Healthy Forest Grant. I don't have the new Bullards Bar treatments on here, but you can see the site of Kemptonville biomass plant is right in the middle of all of it.
The Yuba Foothill area, that will make it more fire safe. Is that the basic understanding?
Yes, that's the goal of it. All of the treatments are fuels reduction treatments. And so this is just a summary slide. This is our brag slide. To date, Yuba Water Agency has invested $10.8 million, and that includes the $6 million in the FRB2 area. So that's over 10 years. That's promised, not spent. But that $10.8 million has leveraged to date $172 million for our upper watershed and Yuba County. We're currently collaborating with 19 partners and counting. We've developed 14 projects, again, in the upper county and upper watershed. We've treated around 6,100 acres so far. I expect that number to snowball quite quickly now that all these planning documents are in place. And we've got innovative planning both in the federal side, up with the 210,000 North Yuba Landscape Project, and using the CalVTP CEQA document in Upper Yuba County in our new grant. So things are really happening in the Watershed Resilience Program, and I'm happy to answer any more questions that you have.
Additional questions from the board?
I'm a little curious about the mechanics on the Forest Resilience Bond. So the investors, that's not what we are. We're not receiving any of our money back. We're not receiving an interest rate. We're the one who funded it as a grant. Other partners are the ones who received the investment aspect.
So yeah, so the private investors fund the work. So the money's kind of released as soon as there's a grant. So for example, if there's a CAL FIRE grant for $2 million and a federal allocation of $2 million, so that $4 million would go to one of the forest resilience bond areas, that immediately releases that $4 million from the investors on the ground. Yuba-Water secures the interest while that work is happening and those investors get paid back. So
and just a mild interest, what is the interest rate the investors receive?
I actually don't know that number. Willie might know that number.
So there's a few different types of investors. The Rockefeller Fund and the Moore Foundation are the primary investors, and there's a couple insurance pools that are investors. I think the Rockefeller and Moore get something between 2 to 2.5%, and I think the insurance pool gets somewhere around 4%. I don't know what the blended weighted average is, but that kind of gives you a scale.
Thanks.
I'll also add, Seth, that the Forest Resilience Bond was really a catalyst to put the partnership together, and that's what brought us all together. I told this board 5 years ago that we could just write a check for our portion. We don't have to do the Forest Resilience Bond, but by doing the Forest Resilience Bond, it created the collaboration that you see here to leverage our $10 million for 170.
The slide you had just before this had the gross acres in a project and then forested acres. Is the forested acres, the 175, the goal of trying to make all of that fire safe?
Yeah, so, planning area covers a much larger area than you would not touch every single acre in that, but the planning area would cover it. And then you'd have strategic, and it also is based on land ownership and people that want to get involved. So just because you've planned over an area doesn't mean those have to be treated, but we would be covering that so that when new projects occur, they're well within that footprint.
And then the people that privately own part of the 175, they also do forest work themselves?
I mean, we primarily work with large landowners, SPI and other non-industrial timber companies like Chai, Siller Brothers, Ingersoll. All of those large landowners do these kind of treatments and to benefit and protect their lands. You could bring in other small landowners. We've really focused on the large landowners at this point just to try to increase pace and scale. It's much more simple.
Well, I'll also add, Director Matthews, I think to back up and give you a concept. So 5 years ago, this board trusted us to go out and start working in this realm and see what we could get done. I think we've gotten a lot done, and honestly, I feel guilty when I work with Joanna on this because it's so much fun. I don't feel like I should get paid to do it. But look at the success here. What I'm saying is, you said, okay, go do the first forest resilience bond of a proof of concept and see what happens. And it turned into the forest resilience bond too, and it turned into something big. So we dipped our toe in the water, and then one of us just pushed it in, basically. That's an example on a few different things. One, the forest resilience bond. The other one is the use of Cal VTP, California's Vegetation Treatment Program, which is a CEQA exemption to increase the pace and scale, or basically make the permitting for private landowners. This is on state responsibility area, not on Plumas or Tahoe National Forest. Make the permitting for this type of work go much faster and more efficiently. That rule came out, the Cal VTP rule came out a few years ago. We were one of the first entities that used it, and we used it on a fairly large scale. It was on our first Healthy Forest Grant program. And so we implemented this work under that. And then now this next phase of the Cal VTP and this next $7 million round, like Joanna said on a previous slide, what we're not doing is going, okay, it's going to be 4,000 acres. So we're going to put the Cal VTP on the 4,000 acres. We thought, look, why do that? If the Cal VTP program works, the CEQA exemption works, why not blanket the entire forested part of Yuba County under it? That way, and this gets to Director Matthews' question, if a small landowner in Challenge has 20 acres and they call up the Fire Safe Council and say, hey, I'd like to do something on my property, we now have the CEQA exemption for their property ready to go. So we're basically, if they want to play, if they want to do it, the CEQA stuff is basically done. Now, Joanna said you have some on-site botany type stuff, some wildlife type stuff, and some archaeology type stuff you have to do, but the overarching CEQA document is done. So, Director Matthews, to get more directly to your question, Joanna mentioned that we're in partnership with the large landowners, Plumas National Forest, the Tahoe National Forest, Siller Brothers, Chai, Sierra Pacific Industries, Ingersoll. That's the way we can benefit more watershed faster. You know, go to the big landowners first. The small landowners, every landowner you interact with, whether it's a 100,000-acre Tahoe National Forest project or it's a 100-acre Ingersoll project, it's an interaction. No matter what you're covering, it's a contract, it's insurance, it's the financial stuff. Whether you're spending $1,000 or $1 million, there's a lot of work involved. What our strategy is to set up the Fire Safe Council to now go out and work with these smaller landowners. And I'm thinking areas like Dobbins, Oregon House, Challenge, Brownsville, where a lot of the work isn't actually treating the work, stuff on the ground. It's actually meeting the landowners, understanding their interests, making sure they truly want to participate in something like this to benefit their property and benefit the community. And so we're entering that phase now and setting up the Fire Safe Council to be able to do that, both with proven practices that work and also the CEQA exemption that will allow them to do. Long-winded answer, Charlie, but I've been sitting here for 20 minutes and I want to say stuff.
I guess I can only speak for myself on the board, but I assume I can speak for everyone. What we have done is benefited Yuba County tremendously, and it's primarily from you and your staff that came up with these ideas to do and execute them, and we're seeing the benefits of it, and we'll continue to see the benefits for many years to come.
First off, thank you. Secondly, you're correct. Lastly, yes, we're seeing the benefits, but I think we're just on the beginning of seeing even bigger benefits. Like Joanna said, we've been doing this for 5 years. We've only treated 6,100 acres, but now we have the environmental permitting, whether it's on the federal forest through NEPA or the state responsibility area through CEQA. We're getting that stuff done. We're at $130 million in federal funds. We've just got $7 million more from the state to do the smaller area. We're basically we've just started, and now we're set up to do even more. So I think the major bulk of the work is in the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you.
So I have a question now. Who's doing all that work, and how can we get more local, smaller people into doing this work, shipping and logging?
I would like to start with that. I mean, that's the beauty of the Forest Resilience Bond, in that, when you get a state or federal grant, the cycle of cash flow is really, you invoice quarterly, they pay you quarterly. If there's not a budget, the state might not pay you for a year. So grant funding is very difficult for local small contractors to be involved with. The Forest Resilience Bond money allows for the impact dollars to be on the ground. National Forest Foundation really manages that implementation with its contracts to local contractors. And they can pay them weekly if necessary. That money's available as soon as they invoice. So it really does help keep that cash flow for small contractors to be involved. And the way is to really come and bring your people and put your hand up there. They put out RFPs all the time to contract this work. The Yuba Community College is developing certificates so that people can sort of train up in the key skills that you need to get involved in this work. And then honestly, I'm talking about it anywhere someone will give me a microphone, like come work in our watershed, because the money was only really the start. We do need more workforce, and we do need more funding for infrastructure for us to really increase pace and scale. Like money for implementation is not enough. You need the people as well.
So somebody would go onto the National Forestry Foundation website.
They put out RFPs, and I mean, I'm not a contractor, but I think there's listservs that you get on, and then you can find out information on those RFPs. But I've had a few local people contact me, and I put them in direct contact with NFF. So anybody that's interested or has a question can contact me directly, and I will make sure they get to the right person.
I'm gonna have somebody call you, because they got a hold of me. They're up in Brownsville. They've got a small company doing forestry management, and I took them to the Fire Safe Council last month. So just trying to get them in the right direction to get some of this work.
That was a good start, but yeah, I'm a good second stop.
Okay, thanks.
Any additional comments and questions from the board?
I'd like to have page 19 sent to me.
Okay, well, I think it's in.
Great. Thank you, Joanna. Great presentation. Awesome update. Next is item 7, receive a presentation from an intern on projects completed during the 2023 summer intern program. Willie, I think you're going to do the introduction here.
Yes, so our intern today is Riley Mount. He's interning up the plant with our engineering department, and I'm sure you recognize the last name.
Morning, Riley.
Morning. Thank you for having me. Alrighty, so as you heard, my name is Riley Mount. Thanks for the introduction, Willie. I'm just going to give you the brief overview of everything that I've seen and done this summer during my civil engineering internship. So started my first week with Ben Deal, who's with us here. We started off by inspecting the gantry crane at the top of new Bullards Bar Dam. That crane is to manage flow out of the dam. It's being repaired so that they can operate it properly as preventative for the tunnel outage project, if I'm not mistaken. And then the rest of that week was focused on the Colgate Penstock East Access Road. So this road, it's about 4,800 feet long. It's to be able to access the spoils pile that was all the material removed from the tunnel boring project when they drilled the tunnel from New Bullards Bar down to the opening out of the mountain at Colgate where it enters the penstock. So during the tunnel outage, they have some parts to replace at the CPSV. And so they need to have a proper access road for maintenance purposes, and then to be able to access that spoils pile because they want to remove rock as they can for all their local projects. So that next week, they had a contractor out there at Colgate. There's stairs to be able to do maintenance on the penstock at every joint. They were having issues with the hardware coming loose, breaking, whatnot, rusting out, since there's a lot of moisture coming off the off the penstock. So they replaced all the hardware and then they torque striped it so that it can be inspected yearly, monthly. Not exactly sure how they're going to do that. So once they finished, I went up with Justin Hoffman and met with the contractor to check it over for final inspection so that they could get as-builts and be done with that project. So this was a big learning curve for me. Trimble Project Site, it's a construction management program. You can do everything from viewing your drawings, your specs, communicating with the contractor, managing RFIs, submittals, punch lists, just about everything you can think of. So Granite has received their notice to proceed for the East Access Road, and this is all set up, ready to go for them. There's nothing really showing because we haven't received any submittals or RFIs at the moment. It should be any day now that we start receiving stuff. So as everyone is probably curious about, the power system headquarters. Construction began July 11th. They began mastication of 11.75 acres. This was completed by North Tree Fire. They came in before they're a subcontractor for Big S Asphalt, who's doing all of the earthwork for the project. They masticated the area so that they could complete construction without really any obstructions. This was a first time for Big S to have a site masticated, so it was definitely a learning curve for them also. This took 2 weeks to complete, and then mass grading occurred. So this is actually a small rock, I guess they considered it, about 7 feet tall. It was directly in the center of the pad for the admin building, Building A. So they had a shelf that they ran into there while they were trying to reach subgrade. And what was funny is the D8 could barely push it. So even me standing next to it doesn't really give it a great size comparison. So yeah, they began on the 25th. They moved in everything from a D8 to 657 scrapers, little D6, 815 compactor you can see in the background there. And so they've moved a few thousand cubic yards now. They've removed all the organics. It's moved over into a pile. It's about 100 by 100 and about 5 feet tall. It's there just to sit there and decompose until someone figures out something to do with it, or it's off site. It's not part of the building footprint, so it'll just stay there for now. So they have cut building pad A, B, C, and D. They were cutting it 2 feet below subgrade, and then they're doing 18 inches of line treat to ensure that there's no differential settlement under any of the buildings, since some of these buildings will have some very heavy equipment under them. So now that they have reached subgrade, this was last week, we had our outside testing agency, NV5 out of Chico, and they started doing nuclear compaction tests. This is a picture here of me holding something. It utilizes an app called Ziptility, and it's got a little GPS dongle, and it's to accurately pinpoint all of the test points that are on the job site, because there will probably be about 1,000 to 1,500 tests throughout this job site, testing subgrade everywhere. And so actually the main part of documenting the test points is documenting where they had failures, so that when they come back in for retesting, we can make sure they're within about a foot of the initial test. And then part of our retesting procedures through YWA, which I've actually been creating a QA/QC program to kind of tighten it up, so there's less things that can go wrong, as we've already seen on this. And then we have them test within about 5 to 10 feet of the other test to ensure that everything in that area is good to go. So this is a picture of me for size of the stockpile of good material is on the right. This is building pad D. This is the equipment storage. It's an open pole barn. It's about 260 feet long and 60 feet wide. We've actually been working with Big S and Hilbers and their concrete subcontractor, Brian Taylor. We're figuring out little things that got missed in the design. So we had to over-X this pad because they're going to put a 15 feet of a concrete apron in front of the equipment building, so that the asphalt doesn't get tore up when you're maneuvering equipment in the storage area. On Friday, they actually had a few failed tests on this pad. So when I left yesterday, they were ripping it to let it bake, and then they're going to recompact. They've found that the soil up there is a lot of decomposed granite, lots of granulars. So it's actually been very tough for the contractors to meet the compaction standards that we have. We had set forth 95% under all the building pads, and it's actually been reviewed by the civil engineer, architect, everyone, and we've brought it down to 92% under all the building pads is what's required, because they were having trouble getting it into the 90s. So they've been kind of changing their means and methods to ensure that there's proper compaction under the building pads. And the reason for cutting the building pads first and not grading the whole site as a whole is they would like to start with concrete beginning October. They would like to have at least the admin building, building A. They would like to have the structure up before the rain starts, so that they can keep all their subcontractors busy. Since there is a ton of electrical, plumbing, mechanical, there's a whole almost year's worth of work just inside the building, getting all the MEPs done. And then once the rainy season stops, if we have a rainy season this year, then they'll do the vertical construction on building B, which is a warehouse, and then it's the big antenna station as a redundancy system. So there's a lot of work under that pad. And then building C will be fleet warehouse. So Dusty, the mechanic for Yuba-Sutter, he has his own shop now to work on their fleet and maintain their fleet. Some of the less exciting stuff, just some basic abbreviations I learned. One of the first ones that came up was a tunnel boring machine. So I was learning about the tunnel that they cut from New Bullard's Bar down to where the penstock comes out of the mountain. Rock slope protection. I had seen this on plans many times. And now after going over and reviewing the lower road plans or the east access road plans, there is a lot of rock slope protection because of how steep the mountain is that the road is cut into. Something I learned when I started at the headquarters was rental purchase options. So a lot of this equipment and a lot of contractors cannot afford the big pieces of equipment. Like for example, the scrapers they have there, those are $1.5 million off the lot. So what they do is they rent them, and that money goes towards their purchasing once they hit a certain hour limit, and then they can purchase them at a lower price. Client line item number. So when I started with the addendum for the Lower Road project, there was a lot of questions, and I kept seeing this abbreviation and had to learn it because it's going to come up a lot in my career. CPSV, Colgate penstock shutoff valve. This comes up a lot because it's going to be part of the tunnel outage project. So I hear that a lot. Turbine shutoff valve. I got that when I got a tour of the power plant at Colgate. And then CDF, controlled density fill. So one of the things that the power system headquarters is our engineers did not want dirt fill for all the trenches. They wanted something controlled density fill. So it's a low sack mixture of concrete so that they don't have settlement issues under the pad. And that is coming up a lot.
Go back a little bit. You said you took the compaction requirement from 95 to 93 as a contractor was having trouble with this type of material. What does that do to you had a 95 for a reason. How did you justify going down?
So I think the engineer and everyone agreed that with the way the soil is, that's about the best that they can get out of it. The 95 was still kind of a high standard, and that's what Yuba-Water wanted. But after, after starting on the site, that became really unfeasible for cost for everyone and the timeline that they're trying to meet. 92 is still a pretty high compaction standard. For the way that the buildings are, actually I should clarify that. The 92 is just for the subgrade. The lime treatment that's 18 inches, that has to be 95%, and the AB, the aggregate base that is on top of the lime treat will still have to be 95%. So the lime treat is pretty easy, and the AB is pretty easy to reach 95%. But the subgrade was being pretty difficult for them.
Hey, Riley, to help out with this, is there a minimum construction standard of a percent compaction? Is it 92 or are we meeting that?
So I think 95, if I'm not mistaken, that was more for roads. That was kind of a Caltrans standard for buildings, if I'm not mistaken. I'm still kind of learning all that stuff, but me personally, for what I've done and what I've learned, it seems like 90% and above is pretty good for a building. For like a road, you definitely want to meet that 95%, if I'm not mistaken, because it's going to definitely settle when you have the heavy traffic. Under the buildings, you're not going to have much, and there's not more than foot traffic in the admin building. There's not much to it. And that lime treatment, it actually, the way it works, they mix the lime into the soil, and it pulls the calcium out of the clay so that it can't absorb water and it can't expand under the building. So, and it's also for spreading over spots that could be soft. That's another application for lime treatment. So that's part of why they're doing it, just to ensure that there's no settlement issues with any of the buildings. That answers your question.
Partially. If 95 was for a building, just trying to make sure that 93 also works.
And it's gone through the civil engineer over at MHM. It's gone through the architect. It was all approved by everyone, even the structural engineer. They had a big meeting about it, and that was what they all agreed upon. Now that I think about it, I'll probably do a little more research and see exactly what that is. But I was told 95% for roads, and then for commercial buildings, it can vary. It all depends on the structural contractor or the structural engineer and the civil engineer record.
When it falls down, we'll send the bill to Riley.
Hey, I was just listening.
He learned the law before.
If there's so much as one crack in the concrete, Riley, it's all on you.
Ryan Taylor.
There's only two kinds of concrete, wet and cracked.
So a few takeaways. Communication is key, which that's kind of an industry standard, making sure that you're notifying everyone where you're going to be, especially if you're accessing kind of restricted parts at the agency, making sure that operations knows where you're going to be. That's just one of the prime examples that I noticed. And then dam safety is the highest priority at YWA, and I've heard this over and over again, and keeping the people of Yuba County safe. Proper document control is crucial, and I've been noticing this with the headquarters site. We have a massive flow of submittals, RFIs, ASIs, you name it. Our emails are full of Matt Murray and our emails are full of this, and safety is always most important. And that is the end of my presentation. Any questions?
Questions and comments from the board?
How far into your civil engineering degree are you?
So interesting enough, I'm actually going to school for construction management. So when they opened it, it was for any related technical degrees. And so I have 3 semesters left at Chico, and then hoping to continue my career with Yuba-Water. So actually, this is not the last week of my internship. I'm actually going to be working Fridays and school breaks for Yuba-Water. My main priority will be the inspector up at the lower access road. He won't have cell service or anything for data input, such as daily reports, submittals, RFIs that are handed to him in paper. So I'm actually going to be going up there in my mornings, picking up all the documents from him, overseeing that project, and bringing them back to the headquarters where my desk is, and inputting everything so that we have the proper documentation of everything that's been happening. That project will move really quick. They only have a 10-week schedule, so that'll be basically for the rest of the year. That's what I'll be doing.
Through the chair, Riley, a lot of enthusiasm in that presentation. You enjoy what you're doing, you can tell.
Most
And,
definitely.
we look forward to having you work with the water agency, and you're going to have a wonderful life.
Thank you. Yeah, and anyone who wants to come visit the power system headquarters, Hilbers does have side-by-side. They can take you around. Since it is a pretty big site, it's almost a 3/4 mile walk back and forth.
You have no idea how
Yeah.
big it is until you ride there.
Yeah, Andy came and checked it out. I think that was last week. So anytime you just have to come in, check in at the water table. We'll give you the proper PPE to be on the job site, since Hilbers is very strict on that with hard hats and safety vests and all that good stuff.
So I'd just like to add, you didn't give us any background information for these guys. I've known Riley for a long time, back from probably junior high and showing pigs and 4-H. And then he started building trailers and selling them for 4-H, and just races cars, just amazing person. So you should give these guys a kind of a background on you too, when you present again. So.
I just wanted to say it's good to see another generation of the Mellon family coming along and being productive in our county, and also Brian Taylor has some work to finish for me before he starts.
Oh yeah, he's everywhere.
Yeah.
Thank you, Riley. Great presentation. I love the final slide being the key takeaways and the specific things you learned. And I'm glad to hear you're going to be sticking around with us. So that's exciting. Thank you. Anything else?
Working Fridays up at the plant, you can work Saturday.
Yeah, that works. Always up for extra.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, next up is manager's report.
Okay, well, I'll keep it brief because it is brief. We're looking good with new Glory Bar reservoir elevation for meeting our end of year carryover target. We have typical work going on with the recreation season. We put new LED lights on the dam, so if you're out there early morning or late at night, the lights that go around the dam are now LEDs. I'll remind you that on Mondays I go up and I'm the acting plant director. So I was sitting in on a meeting yesterday and I learned a little bit about the fixed cone valve outage that has been mentioned in the last couple of meetings. In a few weeks, we plan to take the fixed cone valve, the bypass valve at Narrow Sioux, out of service for some repairs. Over the past several years, it's been sticking during operations, and that's obviously critical for flows in the lower Yuba River. So we want to get that right and get it repaired. Yesterday, the new parts just came in. They came somewhere from Europe, and the box came in, and I told the team, I said, look, the box is here. And they said, yeah. I said, have you opened it? Well, no, not yet. I said, open the box, make sure it's the right stuff, right? Because we're going to take this thing out of service in a few weeks. At any rate, the drawings show that you should be able to unbolt this valve, and they have Maxim crane all set up to lift this valve out and set it on the deck and do their work and then put it back in. Well, they go out there and they do some measuring, and the way the concrete was actually built, you can't fit the valve out of basically the concrete structure that it's inside of. So they have come up with a way to actually just unbolt it, move it out of the way in place, and get the repairs done and bolt it back together. So the reason I bring this up is we can do all the great planning in the world with contracts with crane operators and outage planning and all this stuff, and then you go out there and you actually measure what's in the field, and your plan is totally changed. But I've got to commend the team for not coming to me and saying, well, we can't do it, we just can't fix it. They said, we can't get the valve out. There's two options. We can break away a bunch of concrete and re-pour concrete later, basically probably doubling the time frame of the project, or we can unbolt it and fix it in place. We got to do some things with rigging and some safety mitigation, but we can get it done. So just telling you, the plant gets creative when they have to. And those are the types of meetings that I'm involved in, that I'm not normally involved in, and I hear the creativity of this team and the willingness to find solutions. As we move along here, all the units are in service. It's summertime. It's kind of peak generating and water delivery season. So this is the time of year we want all our units in service. The energy market is high this week. What I want to bring up is oftentimes I will describe how we meet on every morning at 8:30. The team gets together and schedules water flow and energy bid strategy. And this is a perfect week and weekend to give you an example of how we do that. So generally the weather or the temperature was mild Saturday and Sunday. The team at the end of last week saw this heat wave. We're going to be in 104 degrees today, 105 degrees tomorrow, vice versa, something like that. Yeah. Well over 100 degrees today, tomorrow, and Thursday. But, semi-mild to 98 or so over the weekend, and generally a lower demand in the Cal ISO territory during the weekend. So what they do is they allow Englebright to go down to the lower end of its elevation range. And then how they do that is by not bidding aggressively with the Colgate units. So the Colgate units didn't generate very much over the weekend, and because the prices were still good, but they were not as good as we anticipated them to be this week. And then yesterday for today, they bid almost full load, or basically full load, for today and tomorrow to maximize the generation output during the peak of the heat wave. The reason I say this is textbook is it only once or twice a summer or generating season, peak generating season, do we see the heat wave line up with the middle of the week. It's always a little bit disappointing where the heat wave's on Saturday and Sunday. So yes, the market goes up a little bit, but the demand is down on Saturday and Sunday. So you don't get like these really extreme prices. But this is almost the perfect textbook example of mild weekend, the heat wave peaks in the middle of the week. It's almost, I hate to say this to the team, Andy, Creighton, don't listen to me, but anybody could schedule it. I mean, you can see it coming, but I want you to be aware that that's what we do. And it's just an example of how it's done. So bottom line is we had a very high revenue day ahead day today, and we will anticipate like 1.5.
What would that be in megawatt price?
7,000 megawatt hours. Over 200. Okay, so on the engineering projects, the engineering team, Riley's already talked about power system headquarters, so I'll let that be the update there. Lake Francis spillway crest needs a little, I'll just call it concrete repair. We call it low strength concrete here in your report, but that work has been bid out and is going to be started in the next few weeks, by the end of October. We have a unique water transfer that we did with Contra Costa Water District in one of the amendments to the Yuba River Accord in 2014. We have, and I've briefed you on this and you approved all this over the last couple of years. We have 10,000 acre feet designated in the Yuba Accord where we can sell to either East Bay Mud or Contra Costa Water District. The past couple of drought years, we attempted to deliver water under that amendment, but either the hydrologic conditions or the timing didn't work out. This year is a wet year, and so there's not a great demand for water transfers generally in the state. However, just to show that we can actually execute an agreement and get the approvals with the state board and deliver water under this amendment, Contra Costa and we agreed that let's try and do a water transfer anyway. Even though they don't have a great demand for the water, let's just ensure that we can kind of solidify this agreement to show that we can deliver water. So last week we delivered 1,538 acre feet at $75 to Contra Costa, and they got it into their conveyance and storage facilities. It was successful. It's done. It was approved by DWR and the state board. We have, final payment and invoicing to be done, but we've been working on this third-party water transfer effort for 15 years. It's the first time we've got it done. The first chapter of the accord, the first 15 years will be over at the end of 2025. It took us nearly the entire 15 years to effectuate one of these transfers, but we did. And so my team and the consultant team are pretty happy, even though it's only 1,500 acre feet, just the symbol of being able to transfer water under that mechanism, a great accomplishment. Okay, so we're square within El Nino, talking about the warming of the Eastern Pacific. I think we transferred into El Nino sometime in the spring, but you can see on your charts there, we're solidly in El Nino. Okay, that's great. We know what the temperature is in the Eastern Pacific, but what does that really mean with the weather this coming winter? We don't really know, but we do know that's the ocean condition in the Pacific. What I do want to point out is on page 4 of your report, you'll see something that's kind of unique, where when you normally see the graph on the bottom shows the temperature outlook, and you kind of have above normal in California, pretty extreme in like Arizona. When you normally see the high temperatures there, you don't see a high probability of precipitation. So if you look above at the precipitation map, you have a high probability of precipitation and high temperatures in California. Well, what does that result in? That results in this humid thunderstorm type activity. It's kind of unique. The reason I bring this up is, one, it's unique. It doesn't really affect us operationally. I mean, we have the water in the reservoir, we're delivering the water, but what it does affect is, the risk of wildfire, and nature caused, lightning strike caused wildfire with, yes, there's an increased chance of precipitation, but this isn't the precipitation that puts out a fire. This is just a light rain that doesn't really accumulate. It doesn't really mitigate the fire risk. So I'm just point that out, unique weather condition and risk of fire going forward. The next couple slides are related to the fire this fall, which at any given fall in California, you have severe fire weather at all. Fire strike or a cause. Okay, lastly, communications and community relations update. The Rotary Screw Trap pilot project on the North Yuba River. This is part of our $2 million grant with California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Was highlighted in the Union in Grass Valley, KNCO Radio Nevada City, and on YubaNet. And there's also upcoming public meetings both in Downeyville and Nevada City. That's just to explain to the public the scientific pilot project program we're undertaking in partnership with CDFW on the North Yuba River near Downeyville. And tomorrow we are hosting a tour with the local law firm and Supervisor Messick. You are going to attend, correct?
Finally get my tour.
Finally. Okay, so when I see you, the guilt trip can stop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So at any rate, there's a field tour tomorrow of our facilities. And on Thursday, I'll be speaking about the Gear Fishway project at the Marysville Rotary Club. I have to say here, the second best Rotary Club in the area.
That's right.
Okay. Friday, we're sponsoring the Beale Summerfest concert at Beale Air Force Base. And this weekend, we're sponsoring the Yuba-Feather Communities Services Mountain Fair. And next weekend, we're sponsoring the BMLC Golf Tournament, Dance with Our Stars, and the Plumas Lake Block Party. And then on August 30th, we're hosting a tour for Yuba-Sutter Chamber Ambassadors. And our next board meeting, along with an ABP committee meeting, is September 5th. And that is the day after Labor Day.
Any questions or comments from the board?
Just that even being the second best Rotary is still inferior to the best Kiwanis Club.
I don't think so. But... Okay, thank you. Director Fuhr, any board member updates?
Yeah, you're talking about me. So I did some drafting on Cache Creek research, of course, a couple weeks ago, and it occurs to me when we're doing our river restorations, we should be putting in Class 4 rapids. So we're going to do some sort of possible like water park rafting thing next to the casino, and that's cool, but we can just capture all those tourism dollars by creating rapids when we do our river restorations. So I'm really in favor of us making rafting tourism happen. Is that a thing?
Well, I mean, if we're going to build the Arc Spillway, we could get super creative and have probably class 10 if there's something.
At class 6, people die.
I'll challenge you back.
I want class 4 rapids. All right. I want to point out again, the agency here helps Yuba County quite a bit. We did our budget hearings. We talked about the various ways in which you guys help out Yuba County via directly there, whether it's the PERS, it's funding drainage, or it's nepotism. Whatever it is you guys do, it's very valuable and we appreciate it. I'm curious if we have any progress on the CCA. So if you can get back to me on that and see where we're at, I would love to move forward on that to create even more benefit.
Can I go ahead and respond?
Please.
So I have a draft CCA report on my desk. I'm meeting internally with staff and consultants that have prepared that over the next month or two. This before we'll see something related to CCA suggestion, progress report, something. I haven't looked at it yet. I've heard about it from Creighton. We have a meeting next Friday to go over it internally, but that's coming your way.
Okay, great. And then did we ever resolve that question about the gap difference being usable where?
I have that in the back of my mind, and I will impart that question upon the team once I get the kind of the bulk of the CCA report absorbed.
Okay, great. There is a battle of the bands going on weekly. I think I'm a judge on Friday, so feel free to come out and watch incredible judging of bands. I'm doing more research on water next week in Alaska, so I'll get back to you guys on that. And there is a September 9th garbage cleanup for all of Hearst. So I'll need to be borrowing the $1.5 million scrapers and any other tractors, devices you have available, and we're going to make all of Hearst great again. So I'm depending on you, Riley, to hook me up with that stuff. You have the key to the lot, right? Do you have the access? Yeah.
Don't answer that, Riley.
All right.
Moga, make all of Hearst great again. Okay. Director Blazer.
So the watershed resilience program that Joanna presented, of course, triggers a lot of memories, starting with the campfire and then the Northern Complex fire, and of course the million-acre Dixie fire, and that, you know, gets you back to why we're doing all this. And then, of course, currently our thoughts are with the Lahaina fire and all that devastation. So thanks for the presentation.
Thank you, Director Vasquez.
I would suggest a tour of the Dobbins facility by all the board. It's an eye-opening experience, and had no idea that was such a big footprint there. And it's too bad we can't record some of the presentation of the interns. I think that would really help a lot of kids to have hope for a future in this area. Too often they think they're poor, and I think this shows that we're a company that invests in Yuba's future.
Director Vasquez, they are recorded, because this meeting is recorded, and we do plan to extract them out of the recording.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Great. Thank you. Director Messick.
So I will be attending the Mountain Fair this weekend, and I'm going to be in the rib cook-off Saturday. So if you guys are all looking for good lunch Saturday, come up and buy some of the other ribs, because I'm not much of a rib cooker. But and if anybody wants to take over that project, what happened was the Forest Service backed out of the rib contest, and I stepped up. But if you guys would rather do it, or the water agency would rather do it, have at it. Because I also have other things going on Saturday. Also, will be attending the BMLC golf tournament and playing in that golf tournament for the water agency. And I will be attending the Dancing with the Stars, and may or may not have a small role in one of the videos of Dancing with the Stars. So y'all come out and watch that. No, I don't know. We'll just have to see. Then my other question was, what percentage of time do you think you spend on the forestry resilience deal? Because you said we didn't have to pay you for that time.
Well, I won't charge you extra for the other stuff I do on Saturday.
That's it.
Thank Thank you, Director Matthews.
I would like to also comment on the forest resilient with what happened in Hawaii. It brings to light what happened in Paradise. We don't want it to happen in Yuba County. And I would also like to point out that a lot of water agencies have attorneys and have engineers as their lead person. We have a forestry person that leads us, and I think that that's very good, not only for his ability of working with the state and our relicensing, but doing the things that really help the county by forest resilience. Other than that, I would like to compliment the intern program. I think that it's not only good for the interns, it's also good for us as board members to see what's happening. And with see what's happening, in 2 years, we have to renew the accord. And I think all 7 of us would benefit from learning more about the accord, how it works. It was our first main revenue stream when we didn't have power revenue, but we sold water before the accord, and then we sold water in the accord. But since it expires in 25, it's time that we all learn something about it. We have the fifth Tuesday, and depending on what the chairman and you all think, that might be a good time for the 7 of us to have a workshop on the accord, because it's a major factor in 25. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bishop.
I guess just report to the rest of the board. We had a meeting last week with the South County Infrastructure Committee, ad hoc committee, and just got a report on, that was Andy and Gary and I, got a report on the status of that sewer line from Wheatland to Olivehurst. The state doesn't have as much money as they thought they did a year ago. And so we're hoping for the best there.
Great.
Could I add one thing?
Yes.
So I forgot to add in that the Dobbins Grange and Dobbins Farmers Market in Dobbins is needing some help. And I kind of turned that over to Jackie Silman, and she just took the ball and ran. She's getting the local union training facility over here, the Plumbers Pipefitters Union, is stepping up and going to do a bunch of work on the property, build them a new snack shack, and then we're looking into maybe a new pump for the water well. So I want to thank Jackie for that.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, I've got a couple items. First of all, last Friday, I had the opportunity to go on an Aqua Region 1 tour of the Geysers geothermal field over in Lake and Sonoma counties. It was quite impressive. It covers about 45 square miles, generates about 700 megawatts of power in 13 different power plants, comes from steam in a reservoir that's, gosh, I don't have my notes open, but I want to say it's like 4,000 to 15,000 feet below the surface. So super impressive. They after they generate power with the steam, they cool it and they put about 25% back in the ground. And then they also get treated wastewater from Santa Rosa and basically try to recuperate everything that they take out of the ground back into the ground so that it's fully sustainable. So it was extremely interesting. I had known about that facility for quite a while growing up in Napa, but I'd never been there, didn't know those kind of details about it. So it was quite the contrast to how we generate our power, but both definitely power generation tied to watershed and sustainability and those kind of things. So it was great. And then the other thing, as mentioned by Willie, the Plumas Lake Block Party is coming up on August 26th. It is the biggest event of the year in the Plumas Lake community. So if you aren't going to Blues, Brews, and Barbecue that day or Dancing with the Stars, I think it's a busy day for events in the region, then definitely come to Plumas Lake. It goes from 3:30 to 8. It's got live music, lots of great food. It's hosted by the best Rotary Club in the county, and live bands, kids activities, beer garden, just amazing stuff. And several thousand people usually attend. So It's Saturday, August 26th. So with that, I think that's it. We'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Yuba-Sutter.live's local government live streams are presented by Plumas Lake Self-Storage in Plumas Lake, where lifelong local residents are helping other residents keep things safe, providing indoor storage units, outdoor RV and vehicle parking, moving supplies, and Penske truck rentals. Details at plumaslakeselfstorage.com.